Polaris Ranger XP, I think it's 800. It's got a lifter that failed in it. I've already pulled the rocker cover, verified all that, so we're gonna replace all 4 lifters, the damaged push rod, and cylinder base gasket and head gasket, along with the exhaust stuff that I removed. First thing you gotta do is drain the oil. Already done that. Next one probably be disconnect the battery, at least the positive, because we're probably gonna have to disconnect the throttle body, and I just don't want to throw the computer into some sort of haywire mode. You know, this is a better safe than sorry situation. It shouldn't hurt anything to unplug everything with the machine off, but you know, rather be safe than sorry. Battery's disconnected, gotta prep drain the coolant, so that's actually pretty low in there. I can't even touch it with the tip of my finger. Awesome. You're gonna drain the coolant one of 2 ways. You're either gonna disconnect the radiator hose or find a bleeder screw, drain screw on a water pump. That's the water pump down there. It's got that hose clamp on it. Might have to remove the skid plate to access the screw. So there isn't a excuse me, there isn't a drain bolt on the water pump, but you can see that there's a minor leak. Talk to the customer about that later, but it almost looks like someone put a gasket in here or tried to replace something. I mean, those 2 colors of aluminum don't match up. Neither does the oil pan and the rest of the motor, really. And there's that seam from the sealant, where the seam of the case has squished that sealant out. Don't know the history on this one, but we're fixing one of the problems. Okay, decided I'm going to pull the exhaust off and drain from that radiator hose, just because it seems like it's going to be easier access, and the exhaust has got to come off anyway. So looking in here a little further, I think the situation is someone sold this because they had to unfortunately spend a bunch of money to find out what I already know about these things. There's a lot of little new parts in here, like that spring on the exhaust. All the others are rusted and that one's perfectly clean. Okay, that stands out. That exhaust gasket is nice, shiny, and new, and you can see some staining on the manifold where it looks like it possibly had a leak. I could be totally wrong about that, but anyway, manifold gasket, exhaust manifold gasket looks new. These things are horrible about exhaust gaskets leaking. That seal on the valve cover leaking, and it's starting to look like someone has been in here before. They probably just got tired of fixing it and sold it. I don't have a really high opinion of the Polaris line. I think the only 3 letters that matter in that name are P, O, and S. Just yeah, they're junk. This thing has less than 200 hours on it, I believe, and someone's already had to go into the engine. Now I'm going to the engine a second time, or no, first time for me, but second time for the life of this machine. Rear wheel bearings already got a ton of slack in them. Exhaust gasket's already worn out. You know, that's just not. And yeah, you can see, looking at the head bolts, someone's been on there. You know, they don't have wear on them when they've never been touched. So someone's been in here. Well, some skips got stepped in the video process, but pulling the rocker arms and then pulling the cylinder head, got the manifold, exhaust manifold removed, got the intake manifold removed. Coolant's drained out. Alright, here's a head gasket. Head gasket's getting thrown away. Head looks fine. I'll clean it up before I put it back on there. And there's our beat up lifter. Sucks that I gotta pull the cylinder and replace a base gasket. It'd been nice if they would have had some retaining nuts in there. Maybe it's mounted. Might be mounted under there. I don't know. If it's mounted to the frame, then I probably don't have to pull it. Yes, it is. So I don't have to pull a base gasket. Awesome. Cool. Here's the lifters. Can you tell which one is bad? New lifters are in. Poured some oil on theirs because they're hydraulic. You know, much oil as you can put on them things is good. Reduce the amount of time it takes for them to prime up. Some just excellent Polaris quality there. You'd love to see it pull the dirty oil in the dish of the piston. It's something that's got like 200 hours on it. It's not a lot of time for a side-by-side. Just absolutely great. Got the cylinder head cleaned off, and this hump in here is so the bolts on your exhaust manifold have thread. But if they'd have just relieved that hump right there, the lifters would probably fit through that hole. I mean, that's an excessively large hole for a push rod, and it's just small enough to drive you crazy. I mean, it looks like the lifter would almost fit through there. That one not so much, but the outer ones, and still that's 3/4 of the lifter right there. That's crazy that they just didn't modify that head. You know, if you're gonna put these components that crap out in the engine, at least make it quick to service. Stupid. Again, this hole is huge compared to the push rod. And yeah, like 3/4 of the lifter fits in there. Could have easily done something about that. The intake flange on the head is super crusty, so I'm going to clean it up. I did notice that I had the base gasket on the block in place of the head gasket, so I went ahead and swapped those out. That was my bad. I just take a second look at everything before you throw it back together. Cylinder head, get it started. Put all the head bolts in, then torque them. Head bolts, you got to torque to 35 foot-pounds and then an additional 90 degrees after letting them sit for a minute. Everything's set to 35 foot-pounds. So now I got my marks on here. I don't have a torque angle gauge, but it's 90 degrees, so it's real easy to draw a straight line across there and just make sure that line turns 90 degrees. You got to do this in sequence. I believe it's top, bottom, outside, cross, top, cross. Something like that. It should be good enough. And now they're all straight across except for that one. That one I went a little over because the bolts kind of rough. That was pure accident, but that's where it ended up. No sense in backing it off because it's, I don't know, what, 15 degrees more. It'll be okay. Rocker arms go to 22 foot-pounds. Rocker arms, you need to torque when the valve is closed, so that will be a video for tomorrow, because I have to pull the CVT cover off in order to roll over the engine. It'll kind of prime them as I'm rolling it over too, hopefully. But yeah, you pretty much gonna wait till one valve presses down, then you're gonna be on the low side of the cam here. You'll have a little bit of slack since these lifters are fresh, you know, they're not primed up yet. You can move them. So I'll roll them all over. Well, snug them down, roll the engine over, and then torque them while I'll torque this one when this one's down. That way I'm getting a true torque reading on the bolt and I'm not fighting the valve spring. Okay, it's the next day. I got the clutch cover pulled off. We're about to torque rocker arms. And what I think I was rambling about at the end of the day yesterday was I need to turn the engine over till one rocker arm decides to compress the valve to open a valve. That one, let's see, I think that's the intake on that cylinder, squeezed down. So I should be able to torque the exhaust. I think the exhaust is the center in these. Yeah, see, it's got all this slop in it. So in a torque wrench, you don't want to yank on it. You don't want to be doing all this. You want to just apply slow, steady pressure till it clicks. I'll do that for all the other ones. And don't drop your torque wrench. That was unintentional. Okay, torqued all the rockers. Now it's just putting everything back that you tore off of here. Injectors, rocker cover, throw a new gasket on that if you can. You want to make sure there's no dirt, debris on any of this stuff. Shoot it with a little film of oil or something so none of it's dry. But these should start to pump up when the oil pump starts to give them pressure. So like right now, you can move them all because they hadn't pressurized. Once oil fills that lifter, it'll stiffen up. Got a few more pieces hooked up. Most of the exhaust I got a cover to put on over there. Now I got plugs pulled and fuel systems hooked up. It doesn't have to be, but if it isn't, it spews fuel everywhere. But basically all I'm doing is I'm cranking it over, trying to get oil pressure to the lifters before I actually fire it. So you do that for about 5-10 seconds, let the starter rest, cool down for a minute, come back. I'm just trying to get, that one's still, it's starting to pressure back up. Yeah, they're starting to gain pressure because they're harder to move than they were. See, and now I can't even move that one. That one's solid. That one's solid. That one's solid. So Doesn't take a whole lot of time, but you just want pressure on them before actually firing up the engine. Otherwise, you know, you can collapse one real bad, and a lot of people are terrible about firing something up and just sitting there stabbing the throttle. But a little bit of patience can go a long way in you know, rebuilding whatever it is you're rebuilding. Now we're running. Fans turning on and off. I just gotta go run it up and down the road and see how it acts. But that'll probably be it for this video. Y'all got any questions? Feel free to ask.